Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to McDuff Lives. This morning, I'm venturing into a new territory for myself. I probably in my life have never been interested in Christian fundamentalism. I suppose just there's some inherent skepticism in me when I think of, Liberty University, Jerry Falwell, John Hagee, and the earlier ones, Pat Robertson, and that crazy guy that got caught with adultery. I can't remember his name with Tammy. Yeah, you'll remember who she is, Tammy with the big makeup smears. Oh, not Tammy Wynette, no. Anyway, the point is that I see these folks as being um, frauds and manipulators of the public, people who eat very well, drive in nice cars, even have limousines in some cases, and then the big churches that have started to dominate the area. We have one or two of them up in Prince George's County. I mean, you can imagine 10,000 people going to the same church service. Well, and the finances that they can put together to put these big shows on with huge choruses and all the best instruments and sound systems to die for. I'm not saying that that's not freedom of religion to do it, but how does all of this stuff happen, and why do we see it everywhere? I've just tended to just ignore it. Huge temple of Christ or whatever they call it, and uh, think, well, that's not anything I can do about that. Um, it wasn't until Harley Schlanger started telling me about the importance of the Scofield Bible, which is our subject today, that I started getting the message. And then when he reminded me of it in the last show on this past Tuesday of Harley and me, uh, I said, okay, I'm going to look into this. And, obviously I'm going to give, yeah, swagger. Thank you, American Honey. Um, I'm going to give Harley I'm going to do a lot of reading this morning. So I have 3 or 4 articles lined up, but I just wanted to first of all to give you a look at this one. It's from the Executive Intelligence Review, which I reference often here on the show. And the caption is "All Praise is Due to Satan, the Ruler of the World" by Harley Schlanger. And the reason that I offer this to you is because it is a thorough beginning. I mean, he begins with Jonathan Edwards, which is certainly really important force in forming what you might call the American psyche, or who we think we are. But it was a complete diversion away from the Puritans and the folks that we talk about in Graham Lowry's work, uh, how the nation was won, where these are Benjamin Franklin's types that are doing science and trying to use reason to form a better way to govern, a better way to live, as opposed to Jonathan Edwards, who resoundingly brings in the fear factor that God is angry and you are a sinner and you better get right, and time is running out. And so that's where Harley chooses to start, and I think it's a great. He transmits right into the election of that year. Uh, the sermon from Jonathan Edwards, going from the Great Awakening, and again, just what I just said, it was an operation against the efforts of the network, which included Benjamin Franklin, to create a new republic on the American continent. And the famous sermon is "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Well, read this article. I'm not going to read it today just because I want to emphasize a couple of other ones first. And let's see if I can't call up the next one I wanted to refer to. Let's remove that and go get the other one. All right, and this is kind of an introduction to what we're talking about. It's a publication called Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. This is published on September 24th. Isn't that interesting? Today is September 24th. This was 9 years ago on September 24th, 2015, by Mike O'Cahill. And so here we go. The Scofield Bible, the book that made Zionists of America's evangelical Christians. And there's a quote at the beginning: for a nation to commit the sin of anti Semitism brings inevitable judgment, quote unquote. And that's a quote from the new Scofield Study Bible. Since it was first published in 1909, the Scofield Reference Bible has made uncompromising Zionists out of tens of millions of Americans. When John Hagee, the founder of Christians United for Israel, CUFI, said that, quote, 50 million evangelical Bible-believing Christians unite with 5 million American Jews standing together on behalf of Israel, unquote, it was the Scofield Bible that he was talking about. Although the Scofield Reference Bible contains the text of the King James Authorized Version, it is not the traditional Protestant Bible, but Cyrus I. Scofield's annotated commentary. That is problematic. More than any other factor, it is Scofield's notes that have induced generations of American evangelicals to believe that God demands their uncritical support for the modern state of Israel. Blessing Israel, cursing its critics. Central to Christian Zionist belief is Scofield's commentary, italicized below, on Genesis 12, verse 13. I will bless them that bless thee. And then in italics, this is Scofield's commentary. In fulfillment closely related to the next clause, and curse him that curseth thee, wonderfully fulfilled in the history of the dispersion. It has invariably fared ill with the people who have persecuted the Jew, well with those who have protected him. The future will still more remarkably prove this principle, unquote. Okay, now think about that in being published in 1909 and then a bigger version in 1917, just as we're getting ready to go into the war. And the political hand behind it, where does that come from? Because it's not in the text of the Bible, but by putting it into commentaries and publishing it all over the world through the courtesy of, guess who, Oxford University Press, it gains legitimacy, even though it is simply the commentary of one person who, if we study his life, apparently is more of a shyster and a fraudster than a doctor of divinity. In his 2008 book, The Rise of Israel, A History of a Revolutionary State, Jonathan R. Edelman describes the crucial support Israel receives from Christian fundamentalists as totally fortuitous. That assertion is belied, however, by the incredible career of the man who wrote the Bible of fundamentalism. 2 years after Scofield's reported conversion to Christianity in 1879, the Atchison Patriot was less than impressed, describing the former Atchison resident as the late lawyer, politician, and shyster generally. The article went on to recount a few of Scofield's many malicious acts, quote unquote. These included a series of forgeries in St. Louis, for example, for which he was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Being a born again preacher did not preclude Scofield from becoming a member of an exclusive New York men's club in 1901 either. In his devastating biography, The Incredible Scofield and His Book, Joseph M. Canfield suggests, quote, the admission of Scofield to the Lotus Club, which could not have been sought by Scofield, strengthens the suspicion that has cropped up before that someone was directing the career of C.I. Scofield. That someone, Canfield suspects, was associated with one of the club's committee members, the Wall Street lawyer Samuel Untermeyer. Samuel Untermeyer is one of the most important figures of the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century. A lawyer of incredible power in the U.S. government and a Zionist, and someone who really fits the bill of the puppet master behind Cyrus I. Scofield. So I wanted to read this other paragraph, and then we'll go on to the main article I wanted to share. Scofield's legacy. Had the Scofield Bible never been published, American presidents influenced by Christian Zionism, such as Truman, Johnson, Reagan, and George W. Bush, might have been less sympathetic to Israeli demands and consequently more attentive to U.S. interests. Moreover, the American people could have been spared the pseudo-Christian rants of John Hagee, Pat Robertson, and the late Jerry Falwell, not to mention the lucrative end times rapture prophecy peddled by Hal Lindsey and Tim LaHaye. But it is the people of the Middle East who have been most affected by an expansionist Israel, emboldened by the unswerving allegiance of Christian Zionists, led to believe that Scofield's words are God's will. Not least among the many victims of the Scofield Bible are 5 million Palestinian refugees, whose right to return is fervently opposed by America's Zionized Christians. Thanks to their indoctrination by Scofield's unholy book, they believe that Palestine belongs not to the Palestinians, many of whom are fellow Christians, but exclusively to God's chosen people, quote unquote. All right, now let me switch my sources and get the next one up. And I am glad to share this on the screen, so if anybody wants to read the text of it, just slow it down and magnify your screen as big as you can, and hopefully you'll be able to read it. All right. Pardon me as I scroll back. This is a website called fortheloveofhistruth.com, and it's introduced by the webmaster. His name is Grant Swart, Swart. But what we have is the text of C.E. Carlson. His his text is titled "The Zionist Created Scofield Bible: The Source of the Problem in the Middle East. Why Judeo-Christians Support War," by C.E. Carlson. The French author Alexis de Tocqueville, or Alexis de Tocqueville, as we called him in high school history, wrote Democracy in America when he traveled here in the first third of the 19th century. In ringing tones, he sang the praises of America's invulnerable strength and spirit. He attributed its greatness to its citizens' sense of morality, even with the abundant church attendances he observed in America. De Tocqueville wrote in French and is credited with this familiar quote: America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. De Tocqueville could see the power of America, but he could not have known in 1830 that she was soon to be under an attack aimed at its churches and the very sense of morality that he extolled. First, there was a war between the states, which scarred the powerful young nation in its strapping youth. A worse attack on America was to commence near the turn of the 20th century. This was the onset of an attack on American Christianity that continues unabated against the traditional Christ-following church. This attack, which author Gordon Ginn calls the final apostasy, began with a small, very wealthy, and determined European political movement. It had a dream, and the American churches stood in its way. The World Zionist movement, as its Jewish founders called themselves, had plans to acquire a homeland for all Jews worldwide, even though most were far from homeless and many did not want another home. Not any land would do. World Zionists wanted a specific property that American Christians called the Holy Land. But if these Zionists read Democracy in America or any of the journals of any of America's churches, which no doubt they did, they could not help but know that Jerusalem was not theirs to have. As self-proclaimed Jews, they were, according to the Christian New Testament, the persecutors of Christ and most of his early followers and the engineers of his crucifixion. All right, I'm going to stop and just say that's not the way I read it, but again, this is somebody within the Christian religion criticizing this turning, this torsion of the religion toward supporting Zionism and then supporting the actual state of Israel. America's traditional churches in the 19th century would never stand for a Jewish occupation of Jesus' homeland. World Zionist leaders initiated a program to change America and its religious orientation. One of the tools they used to accomplish this goal was an obscure and malleable Civil War veteran named Cyrus I. Scofield. A much larger tool was a venerable, world-respected European book publisher, the Oxford University Press. The scheme was to alter the Christian view of Zionism by creating and promoting a pro-Zionist subculture within Christianity. Scofield's role was to rewrite the King James Version of the Bible by inserting Zionist-friendly notes in the margins, between verses and chapters, and on the bottoms of pages. The Oxford University Press used Scofield, a pastor by then, as the editor, probably because it needed such a man as a front. The Revised Bible was called the Scofield Reference Bible, and with limitless advertising and promotion, it became a best-selling Bible in America and has remained so for 90 years. The Scofield Reference Bible was not to be just another translation, subverting minor passages a little at a time. No, the Scofield produced a revolutionary book that radically changed the context of the King James Version. It was designed to create a subculture around a new worship icon, the modern state of Israel, a state that did not exist yet, but which was already on the drawing boards of the committed, well-funded authors of World Zionism. Scofield's support came from a movement that took root around the turn of the century, supposedly motivated by disillusionment over what it considered the stagnation of the mainline American churches. Some of these reformers were later to serve on Scofield's editorial committee. Scofield imitated a chain of past heretics and rapturists, most of whose credibility fizzled over their faulty end times prophecies. His mentor was one John Nelson Darby from Scotland, who was associated with the Plymouth Brethren and who made no less than 6 evangelical trips to the U.S., selling what is today called Darbyism. It is from Darby that Scofield is thought to have learned his Christian Zionist theology, which he later planted in the footnotes of the Scofield Reference Bible. It is possible that Scofield's interest in Darbyism was shared by Oxford University Press, for Darby was known to Oxford University. The Oxford University Press owned the Scofield Reference Bible from the beginning, as indicated by its copyright, and Scofield stated that he received handsome royalties from Oxford. Oxford's advertisers and promoters succeeded in making Scofield's Bible, with its Christian Zionist footnotes, a standard for interpreting Scripture in Judeo-Christian churches, seminaries, and Bible study groups. It has been published in at least 4 editions since its introduction in 1908 and remains one of the largest selling Bibles ever. The Scofield Reference Bible and its several clones is all but worshipped in the ranks of celebrity Christians, beginning with the first media icon, evangelist Billy Graham. Of particular importance to the Zionist penetration of American Christian churches has been the fast growth of national Bible study organizations, such as Bible Study Fellowship and Precept Ministries. These draw millions of students from not only evangelical fundamentalist churches, but also from Catholic and mainline Protestant churches and non-church contacts. These inevitably teach forms of dispensationalism, which draw their theory to various degrees from the notes in the Oxford Bible. Among more traditional churches in that entourage that encourage and in some cases recommend the use of the Scofield Reference Bible is the huge Southern Baptist Convention of America, whose capture is world Zionism's crowning achievement. Our report on Southern Baptist Zionism, entitled "The Cause of the Conflict: Fixing Blame." And that's a citation to his earlier report, I suppose. Scofield, whose work is largely believed to be the product of Darby and others, wisely chose not to change the text of the King James edition. Instead, he added hundreds of easy-to-read footnotes at the bottom of about half the pages. And as the Old English grammar of the KJV became increasingly difficult for progressive generations of readers, students become increasingly dependent on the modern language footnotes. Scofield's notes weave parts of the Old and New Testaments together as though all were written at the same time by the same people. This is a favorite device of modern dispensationalists, who essentially weigh all Scripture against the unspoken and preposterous theory that the older it is, the more authoritative. In many cases, the Oxford references prove to be puzzling rabbit trails leading nowhere, simply diversions. Scofield's borrowed ideas were later popularized under the labels and definitions that have evolved into common usage today. Premillennialism. Let me try that again. Premillennialism, dispensationalism, Judeo-Christianity, and most recently, the highly political movement openly called Christian Zionism. Thanks to the work of a few dedicated researchers, much of the questionable personal history of Cyrus I. Scofield is available. It reveals he was not a Bible scholar, as one might expect, but a political animal with the charm and talent for self-promotion of a Bill Clinton. Scofield's background reveals a criminal history, a deserted wife, a wrecked family, and a penchant for self-serving lies. He was exactly the sort of man the world Zionists might hire to bend Christian thought. A controllable man, and one capable of carrying the secret to his grave. And the references to the incredible Scofield and his book by Joseph M. Canfield. Other researchers have examined Scofield's eschatology and exposed his original work as apostate and heretic to traditional Christian views. Among these is a massive work by Stephen Sizer entitled Christian Zionism, Its History, Theology, and Politics, Christchurch Vicarage in England. We hold these truths this website is grateful to these dedicated researchers. Our own examination of the Oxford Bible has gone in another direction, focusing not on what Scofield wrote, but on some of the many additions and deletions the Oxford University Press has continued to make to Scofield Reference Bible since his death in 1921. These alterations have further radicalized the Scofield Bible into a manual for Christian worship of the State of Israel, beyond what Scofield would have dreamed of. This unchristian anti-Arab theology has permitted the theft of Palestine and 54 years of death and destruction against the Palestinians, with hardly a complaint from the Judeo-Christian mass media evangelists or most other American church leaders. We thank God for the exceptions. It is no exaggeration to say that the 1967 Oxford 4th edition deifies, makes a god of the State of Israel, a state that did not even exist when Scofield wrote the original footnotes in 1908. This writer believes that had it not been for misguided anti-Arab race hatred promoted by Christian Zionist leaders in America, neither the Gulf War nor the Israeli war against the Palestinians would have occurred, and 1 million or more people who have perished would be alive today. Skipping down a couple paragraphs, Oxford edited the former 1945 edition of SRB in 1967 at the time of the Six-Day War when Israel occupied Palestine. The new footnotes to the King James Bible presumptuously granted the rights to the Palestinians' land to the State of Israel and specifically denied the Arab Palestinians any such rights at all. One of the most brazen and outrageous of these newly inserted footnotes states, quote, "For a nation to commit the sin of anti-Semitism brings inevitable judgment," unquote. This statement sounds like something from Ariel Sharon, or the chief rabbi in Tel Aviv, or Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism. But these exact words are found between the covers of the 1967 edition of the Oxford Bible that is followed by millions of American churchgoers and students and is used by their leaders as a source for their preaching and teaching. There's no word for anti-Semitism in the New Testament, nor is it found among the Ten Commandments. Sin, this writer was taught, is a personal concept. It is something done by individuals in conflict with God's words, not by nations. Even Sodom did not sin, its people did. The word judgment in the Bible always refers to God's action. In the Christian New Testament, Jesus promises both judgment and salvation for believing individuals, not for nations, quote unquote. There was also no State of Israel when Scofield wrote his original notes in his concocted Scofield Reference Bible in 1908. All references to Israel as a state were added after 1947, when Israel was granted statehood by edict of the United Nations. The Oxford University Press simply rewrote its version of the Christian Bible in 1967 to make antipathy toward the State of Israel a sin. Israel is made a god to be worshipped, not merely a state. David Ben-Gurion could not have written it better. Perhaps he did write it. And then again on page 19, 2, God made an unconditional promise of blessings through Abram's seed, to the nation of Israel to inherit a specific territory forever. 3, there is a promise of blessing upon those individuals and nations who bless Abram's descendants, and a curse laid upon those who persecute the Jews. And that is also from the 67 edition, Genesis 12, 1 through 3. This bequeath is joined to an Oxford prophecy that never occurs in the Bible itself. Quote, "It has invariably fared ill with the people who have persecuted the Jew, well with those who have protected him, and, quote, the future will still more remarkably prove this principle," unquote. None of these notes appeared in the original Scofield Reference Bible or in the 1917 or 1945 editions. The State of Israel did not exist in 1945, and according to the best dictionaries of the time, the word Israel only referred to a particular man and an ancient tribe, which is consistent with the Bible text. See Israel, Webster's New International Dictionary, the 1950 edition. Pardon me a moment. All right, I'm going to once again switch to text, but this one goes on for another few um, pages, and it's really is worth reading. So this is uh, the the title is the Scofield Bible Part One on the website for the love of his truth.com. And now I'm going to skip over to part two of the same uh, series on the same website. So hang on a second. Now, here's some of the history that I really want to get into. It's a different writer. This man is named, sorry, N. Davis. So I don't know if it's a man or not, but it's N. Davis's text. And let's find my mark here. All right, here we go. So, about 150 years ago in Massachusetts, especially the small town around Boston, began to be a spawning ground of this brotherhood of man, fatherhood of God idea. It even got so popular it was expressed in Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. It was so important in the minds of these conspirators that every public school child had to be able to recite that quote, "All men are created equal." Isn't that interesting? Isn't it loving? Isn't that a great humanist idea? Without apology, that is not a scriptural idea. Out of this Massachusetts society came a man born in Middleton in 1833 named John J. Ingalls. He was a graduate of Williams College. He was a spokesman for a Boston group known as the Secret Six. Yeah, that Secret Six, the John Brown Secret Six. Isn't it interesting? They picked six. Mr. Ingalls was sent to Atchison, Kansas, and it is enough to say right here that he associated himself with a young lawyer, Cyrus I. Scofield. Actually, Scofield never attended college, even for one day as a student. Scofield, however, fancied himself as a lawyer. He assumed all sorts of phony credentials, from that of a minister to that of a Bible scholar to that of a lawyer, Nothing seemed to hinder him, and of course he was not admitted to the bar as he could not pass the examination. However, through the influences of the Secret Six men in Kansas, Scofield was admitted to the bar. Though he had never attended any school and with no formal training whatever, he gave himself a theological doctorate degree in the same way. It still blows me away that, Kansas, right? Bleeding Kansas, and the John Brown's family and the whole association back with, the Beechers and the New England people behind the agitation of abolitionism. Amazing to me to trace that connection. And I'm grateful to this writer for doing it. Scofield went on, with the help of the Secret Six, to be appointed United States Attorney for Kansas. He never went to law school. He couldn't pass the bar, only to be forced to resign after 6 months when he and his friend Ingalls were caught trying to blackmail the railroads out of some money. What is important here is that the Boston Secret Six assigned C.I. Scofield the task of translating the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man concept into a system of Bible teaching. And this article describes the brotherhood of man, fatherhood of God's concept in the first half of the article, which I didn't read. So again, you should read that yourself to see what he's talking about. It was in those long days and nights when he was in prison for forgery that Scofield began studying the theological philosophy of a born loser named J.N. Darby. J.N. Darby was a scatterbrained Englishman who we would call a hippie today. He never washed, never cleaned himself up, but he became a great scholar. J.N. Darby was already doing in England what the Secret Six had assigned Scofield to do in the United States. He brought the brotherhood of man and fatherhood of God into a new denomination, the Brethren movement. The Secret Six were not stupid. They had done their homework. They reasoned quite correctly that America could not be converted from a republic to international socialist democracy until the vast majority of American churches could be taught that the church is not militant regarding the affairs of state, and that God's laws, statutes, and judgments were not valid as a means of governing a nation. This didn't begin yesterday. They have been after this for 100 years. It was necessary to subvert the First Amendment of the Constitution that the church was to offer no suggestion and be silent regarding the affairs of state. For me, that a light bulb just went off. Is that the silence of our churches to the obvious interference with our freedom of speech speaks volumes. And here it's pointed out for everybody to see and read. The effect of that was vital to every Christian in his way of life. It was quite a project for Mr. Scofield, since God thought so much of righteous government that he devoted 80% or more of Holy Writ to that subject and made government one of the Holy Spirit's special gifts. Now, with the Secret Six, Scofield and some of his associates, such as Dwight L. Moody, things were going to change. On July 23, 1901, Scofield confided in his friends that he intended to develop a reference Bible that would bring about this new beginning and new testimony, quote unquote. Of course, such tremendous efforts take a lot of money and a lot of time. Scofield had the time, and he needed the money. While he was talking like a Christian out of one side of his mouth, he was taking money and doing the bidding of his socialist communist friends of the Secret Six. In 1901, the alleged authors of the Scofield reference notes, which were not entirely written by him, was admitted to the Lotus Club in New York, much to the embarrassment of his holier-than-thou Christian friends. It was restricted to, quote, a social intercourse between journalists, artists, musicians, friends of literature, science, fine arts, etc. Scofield was at that time no more than a Kansas con man. With no background in these particular fields and a man with some highly placed friends, his reference notes had not been written yet, much less published. So his qualifications for entrance into the group was of particular interest. Here it is. This club's literature committee, which passed on Dr. Scofield, was no other than Samuel Untermeyer, who was at that time the notorious criminal lawyer. Untermeyer was, as his name suggests, one of those kinfolk of Esau, Edom, and his accomplishments on behalf of the socialist communists in America takes up 2 columns in Who's Who in America. Untermeyer thought theology, as one might suppose, would be far removed from that of a fundamental Bible believer. No, my friend Scofield was no such believer. It was directed by the Secret Six to the Lotus Club and their associate Samuel Untermeyer, who saw to it he was admitted without credentials. Scofield was just a casual member, they say, but listed as his residence for 20 years, while his wife languished in Kansas without any support. The purpose of Samuel Untermeyer and of those associated with him was to find a way to get fundamental Christians to have an interest in and support for the international Zionist cause, which had been one of Untermeyer's lifelong projects. Samuel Untermeyer died in 1941, but records I have in my office prove beyond a shadow of a doubt he was a dedicated communist at that time, all the time. They prove he worked for communist causes all of his adult life. In the 20 years of membership in the Lotus Club, Scofield had a long association with him and had to know about his un-American activities and his synagogue of Satan. Each of you needs to always keep in mind the brotherhood of God, the brethren movement, and the kindred of thought theology of Scofield's dispensationalism was and still is a class movement as thought of from the communist point of view, not a religious movement, as you might think. One of the Roman Catholic counterparts, also supported by the Esau Edomite kindred, is the Jesuit and Maryknoll liberation theology now sweeping Central America. Again, this is a few years ago. So when I talk about Oliver North and his hardcore Jesuit background and hardcore Zionist background, where he speaks at Zionist meetings where only the flag of Israel flies, and the flag of Israel is on every table, and he stands there and salutes Israel before the cameras, I can say without any hesitation, he's not one of ours at this point in his life. This is the very reason for the special and unusual association between Scofield and Samuel Untermeyer. They knew that Scofield's any moment now rapture doctrine, which he stole from J.N. Darby, and Darby stole it from a female Pentecostal preacher in Scotland named Martha MacDonald, who in turn stole it from a Spanish Jesuit priest, Emmanuel Laconsta, who made it up and then published it first in Spanish under the pen name Rabbi Ben Ezra. The works of Rabbi Ben Ezra are still sold openly in Christian bookstores, so you can see it all ties together. This was an idea they had to keep the lower and middle class Christians in line, they said. Why would Christians become concerned if the communists took over the world or the so-called New World Order took effect? If they believed the rapture could happen at any time now, why would they become worried with thousands of problems of the totalitarian socialism, world banking, national debts, AIDS, and, quote, if quote, this world is not my home, unquote, of Scofield's doctrines? Why do patriotic activities when the kingdom is a warm beating in your heart as you come to love? Sorry, this sentence doesn't make sense. Must be a typo. Let's see. With the many ministers of the 1920s and 1930s around preaching Scofield's dispensationalism, in his words, the New Testimony, became common, but was not heard of 100 years ago. The push was on in the late 1930s to get the Scofield Reference Bible into the hands of Protestant denominations. Scofield notes, stating right on the pages of the King James Bible that, quote, "The Jews are all of Israel," unquote, was to set the stage for the theft of Palestine from the Palestinian people and give it by the United Nations decree to a mixed multitude, most of whose forebears never set foot in the land for 1,000 years, if ever. For those reasons alone, Scofield's notes were worth every penny that Samuel Untermeyer and his secret six friends paid for them. It is not so much that Scofield preached another gospel, which I differ with, that makes me so angry. He is not the only man to have done so, and students of Bible can quickly point out their false doctrines as I have done. With every man can be saved Scofield doctrine, I resent Scofield using God's word as an active and willing subversive to cause the American liberty to fall. His doctrines and reference notes, prepared with Jewish funding, has neutralized the church to where they are indifferent to what is happening to America. So, three authors, including our good friend Harley Schlanger, are calling out the Scofield Bible as a fraud concocted with the. I mean, doesn't it remind you of Devil Bill Rockefeller, the the snake oil salesman that was elevated to, you know, his family becomes the richest in the world based on oil and underhanded tactics. And here you have a fraudster of a different sort, financed for the purpose of subverting Christianity, at least American Protestant Christianity, to the Zionist cause, which, in their view, and the view of the authors and the original American Christian view, opposes the whole idea of the Holy Land being Jesus's homeland. So, and the timing of this too, consider, the build up to World War I and how well it fits with D.W. Griffith's uh, movie in 1914, uh, the, what is it, The Nation. And about the great KKK riders that are saving the birth of a nation, it's called, and about the great KK riders that are saving Christianity. Um, it's remarkable to think how we haven't seen this. It hasn't been talked about in our media, but that has been another result of the silencing of pulpits in every one of our churches on political matters, on government matters. And it's a betrayal of our patriots, such as James Madison, who insisted and obtained the Bill of Rights, not because the rights come from the Constitution, but because the rights come from God. And because we needed them spelled out in the Constitution to make sure and protect them from the civil authorities who might not believe in God. It's been an amazing thing to me just to, over this course of a few days, to have these light bulbs go off and things click in my mind. But now I can see that Harley Schlanger is absolutely right, that the the genocide that's going on right now in Gaza and the wars in Lebanon and all over the Middle East couldn't have happened without the support of millions and millions of Americans who consider themselves good Christians because they read the Bible and because they study the Scofield Reference Bible. It's a tremendous betrayal of millions on every side of this, and I am very, very sad to learn this, but this is part of our world today, and unpacking the layers of deceit is what I try to do here at McDuff Lives. So thanks for being with me. Birth of a Nation was the name of it. That's right. And I'll see you guys on Thursday. As I think you are aware, I am generally taking Wednesdays off now to attend to personal matters. So I will see you on Thursday morning, 11 a.m., right here on McDuff Lives.